if I told you there's a young first-round wide receiver with the upside to lead his team in receiving this season, but he's going in the middle of wide receiver 4 range? He's got a young quarterback, a proven offensive coach, and opportunity. Sound like a guy you want to target? He's just one of 7 sleepers we're going to reveal on this show. Plus, we'll tell you where and how to find some other sleepers of your own. An all-new Draft Sharks podcast starts right now. Matt Schauf, Jared Smola, and Shane Hallam of DraftSharks.com here to really give you a fresh set of fantasy football sleepers. This is going to be a theme that we hit several times throughout draft season because plenty changes, whether it just be our thoughts as we dig deeper on the players, ADP moves, things that happen in camp. We did have OTAs open recently for most of the teams around the league. So we're entering a new phase of draft season. People, of course, have been drafting for months. We're going to reveal 2 players a piece on this show. I'm, of course, going to cheat my own rule on that front and turn my second player into a pair of players. So make sure you stick around until the end, because I'm going to talk about an offense that Jared and I also hit on our 32 Facts show. You can find Jared's Sleepers article on DraftSharks.com now. That already got an update earlier this month. It'll get updated throughout draft season like I was talking about. We're getting new info as we go. But because we've got Shane back after a few 2-person shows, Shane, why don't you kick us off with our first sleeper running back?
Well, my first sleeper is Jaylen Wright, running back for the Miami Dolphins. And I'm a sucker for second-year players that slightly underperformed, so they're undervalued to me in drafts, but moved up the depth chart in the offseason. And Jaylen Wright is not a player whose stat line looked great as a rookie, 68 rushes, 249 yards, no touchdowns. But the Dolphins were drafting him for 2025. They were not drafting him for 2024. I think Jaylen Wright was always going to be a Raheem Mostert replacement. Mike McDaniel has liked to use 2 backs, Mostert and Devon Achane, that we've seen the past 2 years. Now Mostert's gone, and I don't really anticipate Alexander Madison, who signed, or Ollie Gordon, their 7th-round pick, taking away much from Jaylen Wright as that number 2. So at worst, you're getting an elite handcuff, which we saw in week 5 last year when Devon Achane went down with an injury. Wright had his best game, 13 carries, 86 yards, and he actually had the best PFF rushing grade that week of any running back in the NFL. I wrote an article back in November where I highlighted him and watching the film. You saw vision improvements, explosion improvements from college, and he still has that 4.38 speed. Not much receiving as a rookie. I have a little bit of concern about that, but I think we could see Wright get some work with Achane still there, and Achane's going to get that receiving work, be the lead guy. But I think Wright could have that Mostert role and have some big games. And right now, his underdog ADP's RB 53, behind Tank Bigsby, behind Tyler Algier. I just think his Dolphins offense won't be as good as it was in 2023, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as it was in 2024. So if it's better, identifying those offenses that could take off and have that potential, and the Dolphins are certainly one, that's where I love to get these young sleeper running backs from.
And really, Jared, a speed back with Mike McDaniel is just a pretty solid bet, huh?
Yeah, I like this one a lot. I think Wright, was a nice looking prospect coming out of Tennessee. I think he had a better profile than Dylan Sampson coming into the league this year, coming out at the same school. I think Wright is an offseason winner. The Dolphins, like Shane said, only added Alexander Madison and Ollie Gordon after losing Raheem Mostert. And man, Wright's box score last year was not very impressive, but every time I saw him on the field, he looked elusive, explosive to me. He actually led Dolphins running backs last year in both yards after contact per attempt and missed tackles forced per attempt. Obviously a small sample size for Wright, much smaller than Achane and Raheem Mostert, but when he was on the field, he was making things happen. He was getting more than what was blocked for him.
Of course, now that there's so much info out there, you might wonder what is a sleeper, how you find sleepers in fantasy. I think a great way to find sleepers is to check our ADP market index page. I would use the best ball version right now because that is based on the best available draft data, high volume of drafts that are for actual money. So people drafting teams the way they want them to play out. The redraft pages are going to become more usable on that front as we move through summer and get more draft data for other formats. But if you look at that ADP market index page, you'll find the running back that I'm singling out here as a value. That's Tyjae Spears for the Tennessee Titans. And really, I think his upside case right now doesn't even assess the ultimate upside that we'll get to in a minute. He's RB 42 in best ball ADP. That's pulling from underdog drafts right now. He is also RB42 on drafters, which is where I'm doing nearly all of my best ball drafting this offseason. He's RB34 in our PPR rankings. You can see starting at a value proposition there. He is going behind guys like Jaden Blue, Javonte Williams in the Dallas backfield, really just because they have the opportunity to lead a backfield. I think that underweights that they're probably not as good at players as Tyjae Spears is, and maybe overweights the question of his specific situation. 2 rounds behind Najee Harris, you can still get Tyjae Spears. And I think the problem for people in assessing Spears right now is if they liked him last year, then they were disappointed by his usage, because we got, Brian Callahan talking about Spears and Tony Pollard being interchangeable players. And then when they got to the games, Tony Pollard was the clear backfield leader and Spears was maybe a compliment, if you could even call him that. We've got Callahan saying this offseason, quote, "I think we can do a better job of managing that load so they both play a little more evenly. Hopefully that division of labor gets a little more evenly distributed so Pollard doesn't have to take the brunt of it." You can find that in a Shark Bite that we shared earlier this month. We don't always want to take these words from coaches and treat them as the truth or how things are definitely going to go in the coming season. But I think when you get words like that from a coach, you look at the situation, you think about what makes sense. And I think that it makes sense for the Titans to try to give Spears the ball more. One thing working against him last year was injury. So as long as he stays healthier this year, he should be more available. Tony Pollard's going to be a better player if he has not worked as hard as he was last year. We saw him kind of tail off in production and at the very least reliability over the second half. If you look at his PFF grades and stuff like that, those things tailed off over the second half. He was dealing with an ankle injury. He was listed as questionable 5 times from week 9 on for foot or ankle issues. So it would help the Titans to get more work to Spears. And Spears is just a good player. If we look at their careers, Tony Pollard's got a 65.2 career elusive rating, which is fine. Tyjae Spears is at 101.3. He was at 90.8 last year versus 48.6 for Pollard. And what that says is Tyjae Spears is good at creating yards after contact. He is good at avoiding tackles. He is somebody that you want to get the ball to. So I think now that he's going well into RB4 range, I'll go ahead and stick him on best ball rosters, especially where I can at least get spike weeks. And then if Tony Pollard goes down at some point, Spears has the upside to produce like a top 12 running back on a weekly basis.
I just don't think he was ever healthy last year. Like you said, Matt, he tweaked an ankle in week 2, hurt his hamstring in week 6. He missed the next 3 games. He returned for 1 full game after that, then got a concussion, missed another game, was concussed again in week 17 and missed the season finale. So he ends up playing 12 games. He left 3 of those early. Even if we just look at his 9 full games last year, he was PPR running back 32. So he's already basically where we have him ranked, well ahead of ADP. I think if you just get that out of him, you're doing fine. I do think his role could grow behind Tony Pollard. Like you said, Matt, Pollard has always been at his best when he's getting, 12 to 15 touches per game. That's when he was most efficient in Dallas. So there's standalone value for Spears. And then he, I think, is a pretty easy weekly fantasy starter if Pollard misses time this year.
And especially this time of year where you don't have to pick when to start him. He should be more attractive even than he is for lineup setting leagues, but there will be value there as well, especially if he sticks at this ADP. Jared, who's our first sleeper wide receiver?
Yeah, I'm really into Rashid Shaheed at cost right now. He is outside the top 50 wide receivers in ADP on most sites. This guy was wide receiver 23 in PPR points through week 6 just last year before he suffered that season-ending injury. He drew 23% of the Saints' targets in those 6 games. He averaged 2.04 yards per route run. That was 29th among 104 qualifying wide receivers, just behind T. Higgins, tied with Devontae Adams, ahead of guys like Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Rashid Shaheed averaged 8.5 yards per target last year. That's a nice number, but it was actually a career low. His career 10.4 yards per target leads all 164 active wide receivers with 100-plus career targets. I think this is a really underrated wide receiver. The argument against Rashid Shaheed is that the Saints offense is going to stink. That might be true. We kind of don't know what's going to happen at quarterback. Tyler Shuck, their rookie, is the favorite to be under center come week 1. He's obviously a question mark. A lot of film grinders liked him, though. He did go early in round 2. So, I think there's a chance that he's better than I think. We'll see about that. And I think Kellen Moore, the Saints' new head coach, is just a big plus for this offense and could make this offense better than people expect. Moore has 6 seasons of offensive coordinating experience behind him for 3 different teams. 4 of those 6 teams finished top 7 in points scored. 4 of them were top 11 in total yards. None of them finished worse than 18th in total yards. And Moore has consistently run fast-paced, high play volume offenses. All 6 of his NFL offenses have averaged at least 65 plays per game. Just for perspective, only 4 teams averaged 65 plus plays per game this season. So I think you could get more play volume from the Saints than you're expecting this season. They could just be better overall. And even if they're not, like, I think Rashid Shaheed is just going to draw enough targets. Like, what else is there? It's Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, and Rashid Shaheed. I think there's going to be enough target volume for him to produce, even if the offense is not very good.
Shane, Jared mentioned film grinders. We got a film grinder right here. Is Tyler Shough a reason to not draft Rashid Shaheed, or is there some upside in his arm talent?
I think there's definitely some upside in Shough's arm talent. I would take him maybe over Derek Carr on some of those deeper shots that we saw Shaheed catch. I think that's what Shough does well in terms of the deep passing and deep accuracy. And it's more kind of the timing on the shorter stuff that I have a little more worry about Chris Olave with Shough than I do about Rashid Shaheed. So I think it actually could help Shaheed in terms of people are scared off because of the quarterback situation. That's not as much a concern for me.
And frankly, if the offense does stink, then maybe we get elevated passing volume for this team. Whatever the picture is, he's going outside the top 50, as you mentioned, Jared. So there's not a whole lot of risk to taking a shot on a guy who's already showed us that he's going to score in efficient ways. Shane, who is our next sleeper at wide receiver?
Next up is Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers. Again, another second-year player who underperformed, who moved up the depth chart this offseason. This time, it's a first-round pick. And I love a receiver playing in a high-end offensive system and playing in that Deebo Samuel role with Deebo Samuel moving on. I'm pretty excited about Pearsall's potential. In the 4 games that were marked for him as a start, he averaged 16 PPR points per game. That would have been good for wide receiver 15 on the year. That was propped up a bit by his week 17, 8 catches, 141 yards, and a touchdown, but shows that he can have these kind of big spike games, have double-digit targets, be trusted with that. Pearsall's an elite athlete, 4.41 40 time, elite across the board at the combine last year. And once he came back from the shooting that happened and he was out for those beginning games, we saw him kind of get eased in a little bit. He drew a target on 11.9% of his routes over the first 9 games. But those last 2, when he really exploded, 21.2% of his routes he drew a target on. I think the 49ers, again, drafted Pearsall for 2025 to replace Deebo Samuel. Obviously, Brandon Ayuk will be back, but torn ACL with the MCL and meniscus damage, I'm still not sold Ayuk's going to be 100%. I think Jawan Jennings goes back to his kind of slot role, and I just trust the Kyle Shanahan offense and Kyle Shanahan choosing a first-round wide receiver who we've already seen produce big games. Right now on Underdog, Pearsall's ADP is wide receiver 41. That's behind his teammate in Jennings, behind Deebo Samuel now with the Commanders. I'd rather take the upside swing myself on Ricky Pearsall. I feel like he can maybe reproduce some of that Deebo Samuel magic that we've seen in fantasy the past couple years.
As you mentioned, they drafted Pearsall late in round 1, earlier than the market expected him to go. They did so with Deebo Samuel still on the team, with the healthy Brandon Ayuk. So they clearly just like the player. Situation's a lot different now than it was just a year ago, with Samuel gone, with Ayuk coming off the injury, with Christian McCaffrey coming off the calf injury. If you look at the ADP market index or our rankings, Ricky Pearsall is not going to immediately jump out to you. He doesn't look like a value by ADP market index, but this is a ceiling play. He is wide receiver 51 by our straight PPR point projection right now. He's wide receiver 34 by our PPR ceiling projection at the moment. That makes him wide receiver 44 by 3D value when you put everything together. So again, he doesn't stand out as a value, but it's this situation that has some uncertainty, a player that carries some uncertainty, and you might look at uncertainty as a negative, but the fact that this guy got on the field at all last year after getting shot right before his initial NFL season and then produced and grabbed a significant role late in the season, definitely a mark in his favor, and you can still get him at a low price. So that's why we have those ceiling projections in there. It's why we incorporate them in the process. You can turn on upside mode at any point in your draft if you want to accentuate that ceiling potential. Like if you start with 3 early wide receivers and now you want to say, you know, who has more upside than where he's ranked right now? That's when maybe you flip it on. That's when a guy like Pearsall can jump up. Maybe he makes more sense as that late wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 behind more established players that you know what you're getting from. the upside mode is going to automatically turn on halfway through. So you get players like this, elevated as you go. But the ceiling and what could happen is key to look at with Pearsall and, anybody that has a similar kind of case. Jared, why don't you hit us with a sleeper quarterback?
Trevor Lawrence is a guy I'm taking a lot of at cost right now. I mean, to me, outside of Caleb Williams, no quarterback had a better offseason than Trevor Lawrence. Now, that's kind of been priced in for Williams at this point. He is a top 10 quarterback in ADP on most sites. Trevor Lawrence, though, still going outside the top 18 quarterbacks on both Underdog and Drafters. And, I don't think people have reacted to the offseason he's had yet. And I get it. Lawrence has been underwhelming so far, especially compared to the expectations that were, placed on him when he was the number 1 overall pick. He has had 2 top 16 fantasy seasons already. 2 out of his 4 seasons, he's finished top 16 among quarterbacks in fantasy points per game on some bad offenses. He gets a huge coaching upgrade now, I think, in Liam Cohen, who's coming over from Tampa Bay. Cohen just led the Bucs to top 4 finishes in both points and total yards. That season included a career best year from quarterback Baker Mayfield. Mayfield last year, personal bests in passing yards, passing touchdowns, completion rate, yards per attempt, passing touchdown rate. Baker Mayfield finished quarterback 3 last year in total fantasy points. And if you look at Baker's career numbers pre-Liam Cohen to Trevor Lawrence's career numbers, they're pretty similar. Lawrence actually beats Mayfield in completion rate, passing success rate, pretty similar in terms of yards per attempt and passer rating. I think these guys are pretty similar in terms of talent. And you could even argue that Trevor Lawrence has more pure talent than Baker Mayfield does. Lawrence, even more so than Baker Mayfield, I think adds some sneaky rushing ability to his fantasy profile. Then, of course, you add Travis Hunter to the mix to, go alongside with Brian Thomas to give Jacksonville, maybe one of the most talented wide receiver duos in the NFL. So it's really all there for Trevor Lawrence. I still believe in the talent. This guy's still only 25 years old. Again, he has some rushing ability. I think the supporting cast is much better this year. I think he could finish as a top 12 fantasy quarterback this season. And again, he's going outside the top 18 at the position in ADP right now.
Yeah, I think sometimes we can get ourselves into trouble by assigning too much credit to coaches for, big seasons from individual players. Like maybe Liam Cohen was a key factor in Baker Mayfield's big numbers last year, or maybe he was just kind of part of the whole picture. I think the key here is just what you said. Trevor Lawrence is going so late that you can go ahead and bet that there's a boost with Liam Cohen. And at the very least, you're getting an okay quarterback at the level where you're drafting him. It's not that hard to go from QB 18 to QB 12 numbers wise. We've talked plenty about that. It's just a flat area. And it's a great reason to not draft too many quarterbacks that are in that, QB 8 to 10 range, because you can wait on somebody like Trevor Lawrence, who little boost in touchdown rate, and all of a sudden he's a QB1 that you got at a depressed cost. You can find the full case for Lawrence in Jared's sleeper article right now. So, check that one out. I'm going to close it out with, like I said, a cheat here. Not just one player, it's a pair of them because they are teammates, and they are Jayden Reed and Jordan Love from the Packers. I mean, you can argue whether Jayden Reed counts as a sleeper, whatever. He's wide receiver 45 in ADP right now in best ball drafts, one spot behind Matthew Golden, his new teammate, who I will certainly take Jayden Reed straight up over in Golden's first season. A year ago, Reed was wide receiver 36 in ADP. He was going earlier than that in ADP earlier in draft season, but hovered in that wide receiver 3 range after a good rookie season. Wide receiver 42 in points per game last year. So he let people down versus that ADP. Wide receiver 38.5 PPR. So not that far off his ADP in that scoring format. The big thing with Jayden Reed last year was opportunity. He tied for wide receiver 65 in expected half PPR points last year, tied for wide receiver 43 in 2023. So we already knew that there was a volume question with him. It got worse last year, and it dipped as last season went on, which we talked about before. The Packers started out pass heavier, leaned run heavier over the second half. That certainly brought down the opportunities for Jayden Reed. If you look at week 1 through week 9, at that point, Jayden Reed was a top 20 fantasy receiver last year before the fall off. Now, the question here is what we should expect from the Green Bay offense. And I'll get to Jordan Love in a minute, but the Green Bay offense went run heavy last season, a pass rate of 49% in the 6th year under head coach Matt LaFleur. Let's look back at his previous 5 years of pass rates. Before last year's 49%, he went 58%, 57%, 58%, 55%, 60%. So did he just suddenly get Josh Jacobs and decide to run the ball a ton more? Or is that just how things played out last year when they had an injury to Jordan Love, when they had injury to wide receivers, when they had Josh Jacobs running well, when they were winning some games? My bet is that they lean further back toward the pass. If they go all the way to 58%, then I think Jayden Reed and Jordan Love are both going to prove to be strong draft values. Jordan Love, an even better value, I think, than Jayden Reed right now. He's QB 17 going late in round 11 in best ball drafts. He was QB 9 a year ago. So people are way down on him because of that offensive shift that produced worse passing numbers for those pieces. This Green Bay offense, I think, is at its best when it's running the ball not quite as much as it did last year and letting its talented, expensive quarterback distribute the ball to a young, pretty talented group of wide receivers. They finished number 3 in pass offense DVOA last year. That's easy to overlook with the lower pass volume. They were number 4 in pass offense DVOA in 2023. This is a good passing game that I think should get more volume. And at the cost that you're paying for Reed and Love right now, I think they're at least going to give you an okay return on that investment.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to see the path for Jordan Love. You just need the volume to come back. Love actually averaged more fantasy points per drop back last year than he did in 2023. He just dropped back close to 7 fewer times per game, a huge drop there. So I like Love at cost. I'm less into Jayden Reed. I think the Packers just don't see him as a 2 wide receiver set player. He's only out there in 3 wide receiver sets. He plays primarily almost exclusively in the slots. It's tough for a receiver with that level of playing time to really beat ADP. But like you said, Matt, he's going in the mid 40s now. I think that's a fair price. The nice thing about Love, right, is there are multiple stack partners. So it kind of makes him an easy stack. A lot of those guys are even going than Love is in fantasy drafts.
I'll say for Reed too, he gets some rushing. He had 20 carries last year, up from 11 in 2023. I mean, if that number goes up even a little bit more, that's a little bonus on top. And I think Matthew Golden, a lot of people were shying away from Jayden Reed because of Golden. I think it's going to help. If you watch later in the year, teams would bring a safety down to play the run, and then that safety would play in the middle of the field and play the slot. They basically almost double cover Jayden Reed because it was easy to do. Matthew Golden, you better keep that safety back or you're going to be in trouble. I think that could really open up things underneath for Jayden Reed this year.
Yeah, Jayden Reed's going to be a player that I focus on less in lineup setting drafts for the reason that you mentioned, Jared. You know, last year we were wondering if his really good rookie season was going to mean more playing time and more targets in year 2. It didn't. They still remained this committee approach at wide receiver. So after 2 years of that, I don't think we should expect a big boost in Jayden Reed's playing time, but we at least know that he is a good player. He's likely to outperform his fantasy expectation because of the rushing, because he has big playability. So I know at the very least I'm getting a potential spike week guy in wide receiver 4 range. If he does get more playing time, awesome. But right now I'll take those spike weeks at the price where I'm getting him, especially because I like targeting his quarterback later in the draft. Whether you are drafting best ball teams right now or simply starting prep for your traditional lineup setting leagues, all the tools you need are already available at draftsharks.com. You can check out our rankings by format. You can study the best ball ADP market index to find sleepers at any position. And you can sync your league right now to get everything tailored to your specific format and situation. That's what makes Draft Sharks your unfair advantage.